All right, good morning and welcome to a presentation jointly put together by Fresh Picks Cafe and Food Connects about trauma-informed cafeterias for schools in Windham Southeast School District. My name is Sheila Humphreys, and I am a farm to school coordinator working for Food Connects with schools in Windham Southeast. And I am gratefully here on the ancestral land of the Abenaki people on a beautiful sunny day in February, feeling grateful for all that the land has to offer to us. And I will introduce you to my co-presenter, Allie West.
My name is Allie West. I am the Regional Food Service Director for the Brattleboro Windham Southeast Supervisor Union, excluding Putney. And I am just very happy to be here working with Sheila and talking about this very important issue and ways that we can make our students more comfortable and more engaged in our cafeterias.
And just before we go further, just knowing that trauma is a complex issue and can be triggering for some folks, just want to encourage all of you to just take a minute and take a deep breath together and just kind of get grounded. And know that if anything in this presentation is triggering for you, that you're not alone, and feel free to reach out for support among your colleagues, school counselors. We are all in this together, figuring out how to support our students and also how to support ourselves. About 25% of educators in the state of Vermont have experienced trauma themselves. So if you find anything in this presentation triggering, just know that you're not alone. And we've tried to be as sensitive to that as possible when creating this training. And we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so the reason that we have started doing this work is to really raise awareness about food and trauma so that we can understand the impact of our actions and not unintentionally create stress for our students. And it's just important to acknowledge that trauma can come in many forms. Here are a few examples of how trauma may be impacting our students with food insecurity or eating disorders, students who are neurodivergent or on the spectrum, students with historical trauma, which could be experienced by BIPOC students, Jewish students, and others with any historical trauma, students who have experienced abuse, neglect, substance abuse in their home or who have incarcerated family members, students in foster care, students who've had multiple moves during their childhood and switched schools, students who've experienced war or political instability, students with language or cultural differences, and students who are LGBTQ. So just keeping all of those students and their experiences in mind as we think about how to support the diversity in our school system and help everyone feel welcome and safe. And Allie's gonna talk us through the agenda for today.
I totally forgot I was doing that. Sorry. So we've already done the first step. We've welcomed you and we've done our introductions and told you who we are. The next part is actually one of my favorite parts of this. It's reflections from Vermont students with lived experiences. So this is from Joelle Van Lent's studies up in Burlington. And these are actual words from these women, these kids that she worked with. However, they are being recorded by New England Youth Theater from down here, I believe.
Yep.
Then we're going to talk a bit about implicit bias with some stories and actual real reflections there. And then we're going to wrap it up with trauma response practices related to food for school communities. And these are ways that we can make our students more comfortable in the cafeterias so that we're ensuring that they're able to get the meals they need.
Great. And this, just so you know, this training is very brief, but it's based on a full day of professional development that I developed in collaboration with Joelle Van Lent. So this is just a very, very brief summary on what was originally a six to 8 hour training. And anybody who is interested, we encourage you to go deeper into this material, and we will be providing resources for those who want to go deeper and learn more about this topic. So now we're going to go on to those reflections with students from lived experience that Ali talked about. Again, Joelle Van Lent interviewed students that she works with who have all experienced trauma in the Burlington area. And she wrote down their voices, recorded their voices, and to protect their anonymity, we then worked with New England Youth Theater to bring in youth voice actors from our local community to voice the words of these students up in Burlington. I always tear up when I listen to this. It's very powerful. So we're going to move on and let Ali press play so we can hear their voices.
A group of Vermont students was asked what has been challenging about food in school. They offered the following reflections.
It is noticeable that I receive free lunch. Adults speak to us about things we have no control over.
For example, filling out forms for free and reduced lunch or payment for food. The cafeteria is overwhelming.
I'm already nervous about the high school cafeteria. Too many people crammed in one place. I probably just won't eat.
Every school I've gone to has a completely different system in the cafeteria.
Long lines are overwhelming.
There is limited time for lunch.
I'm never sure I will have time, or how much time I will have left.
Children who grow up with chronic exposure to toxic stress often have a less developed internal sense of time or can easily become too overwhelmed to track time.
The process is confusing.
Children may have minimal lived experience eating out and ordering food. The breakfast and lunch meals are all or nothing.
You have to take the whole lunch or pay more. There's no way to take just what food I will eat. It is really hard for me to waste food.
People comment on my portion sizes in front of other students. That is so embarrassing.
It is hard to make choices and decisions in a line, and the social aspect of where to sit is overwhelming.
If you have a friend group, you have a spot. No friend group means no spot.
Snacks at school are usually from home.
No snacks at home equals no snacks at school. I just pretend I didn't want one.
Many students talked about the sensory overload in the cafeteria. Smell, noise, temperature, crowd. Some schools have kids in winter clothing while eating to make transitions faster, but students get hot in their gear. After talking about these challenges, students were asked, "How did you solve these problems?" And their responses were almost universal.
The only way I can solve the problems is to not eat. That's all I can control.
I would rather avoid the whole situation, including eating.
Okay. Thank you, Ali, for playing that slide and letting us hear the voices of those young Vermonters. So now we're going to just move into a little discussion. And if we were doing this live with you, we'd invite all of you to participate. But just Ali and I are going to have a discussion about what this brings up for us when we hear this. So Ali, what kinds of things does this bring up for you, hearing those voices?
When every time I hear the last two saying how their solution is just to not eat, it breaks my heart, because we desperately need to feed these kids, and for them to take themselves out of that situation by not eating is just so heartbreaking to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen that myself working, before I worked for Food Connects, I worked at Oak Grove School for 13 years. And I definitely saw kids every day and who, for whatever reason, in the cafeteria was too overwhelming for them, and they just didn't eat. So that's definitely an issue, not just for kids with traditional eating disorders, but just for kids who have sensory issues and are overwhelmed or are feeling left out or not included. Any other thoughts you have, Allie, about that slide?
Another thing, when we started talking about, the kids were talking about how difficult it is to traverse through the cafeteria. I know at the high school, we have students coming from all different schools and they all had different ways, and it can be so overwhelming. They have no idea what they're doing, and they only have 18 minutes to get in there, get their food, sit down, eat, and get gone. And it's just the process. Even 2-3 months in, these kids are still totally confused. High school students are too. I know it's one of those things where you want to take them by the hand and say, okay, let me show you how to do this. And unfortunately, we can't do that for every student, but it's great. I like seeing when the new students get brought in, they are shown through it. I just feel like we could do more to make it easier for them.
Yeah, that would be a great thing to think about, some kind of buddy system or through advisories or something. Be some great changes to try and implement in the schools. I hope that staff can kind of brainstorm together. All right, and anything else you want to say before we move on, Allie? Maybe, I know we had talked about your cafeteria staff and how they're feeling when they see kids.
I know that this cafeteria staff, again, this is just a basis based on this year's high school experience with them, is they're not necessarily being as empathetic as they could, because they know they have 200 kids coming through. So they just have to push them through. They can't really take the time to stop and say, what's the matter? What do you need? This, that, and the other. And I know that can come across brusque to some of the students, but at the same time, I think my staff in particular all need to this training as well, so they can see it from the student side. And I know teachers need to see that, or parents, and everybody at all the schools, they need to see it from the students' eyes too, not just the adults' eyes.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great point, Allie. All right, so let's move on quickly. Just, knowing that we can't do as deep a dive with the amount of time we have, and hoping that those of you who want to have further conversations will talk to your colleagues or reach out to Allie and I to have further conversations about this, because it is a rich and important topic. So the next little bit of work we're going to do is about implicit bias. And again, we're just touching in. It's not going to be a deep dive because of our time constraints, but many of you through the school district have done some implicit bias work around race. And when we're thinking about trauma-informed cafeterias and food and kids, we like to do implicit bias work with school staff around food. So we're just going to give you a really quick snapshot of what this looks like. I'm going to go first, and we're going to go to the next slide. And I'm just going to tell you my first thought when I see this. So this is a strawberry fluff and jam sandwich on white bread. And I see this and I just think, yuck, so sweet. There's nothing nutritious about this sandwich. I have all kinds of judgment that goes through my mind when I see this. And I chose this because when I was a para and working in the lunchroom at Oak Grove School, my first year at Oak Grove, I had a third grade student who brought a fluff sandwich to school every day for the whole year. And I had all kind of judgments about seeing her eat that sandwich. And she not only did she have the sandwich, but her first grade brother had the sandwich too. And of course, I hadn't done any of this work around trauma and nutrition at that time. This was well over a decade ago. And, if I think back about this student, what I knew about her at the time, and thinking back, I knew that she and her brother had a single dad. and that he worked really, really hard and worked odd hours to try and be home for them in the afternoons after school. And I'm pretty sure he was asleep in the morning when she was making lunch for her and her brother. And this was, I can look at this sandwich through her lens and see that this was her caring for herself and caring for her brother by making them the best lunch that she knew how to make. And so if I think about how I would approach the student now, I would approach her with a lot more compassion and understanding for where she was at and for her circumstances at home. And I would encourage her to try new foods, but I would have a lot less judgment for her around what was in her lunchbox. So Allie, go to the next slide. This is Allie's story.
So for those of you who don't know what this is a piece of toast with ketchup on it. And my first year, I was over at Academy School and I was working the breakfast line. I had a student come up who had just come through the line and asked for ketchup. Now I knew what he had and I was like, what do you need ketchup for? And he goes, for my toast. And it just came flying out of my mouth. Oh, yuck. And this little fourth grader looked at me, put his hands on his hips and said, don't yuck my yum. And I went, you're right. I shouldn't yuck your yum. You're still not getting the ketchup. But that was a really powerful moment for me that why should I put my preferences on that child? And we don't know, maybe ketchup on toast was his, comfort food. And he was having a really bad day and he just wanted ketchup on his toast. So it was a very eye-opening thing. And it's something that I've drilled in all of my staff's head along with me when kids ask for strange combinations or unusual combinations. I call them strange. And I just go, don't yuck my yum, Allie. Don't say it. Don't do it. Don't say it. Eek. So.
Yeah. So just, when you're in the lunchroom or in the classroom and kids are eating, taking food out of their lunchbox or taking, food out of the line, eating off of their trays, combining things, remember that we are role models for the rest of the class and we can, be models around kindness and open-mindedness. We can also model by what we eat, encouraging students to try new things. I remember I worked with a teacher for a while who in the fall would bring in fresh, beautiful red peppers from her CSA, and she would eat them whole, like not cut up or anything, no knife or anything. She would just crunch into those peppers whole in front of the kids, and the kids were so curious about that. And it opened their mind to like, oh, wow, it made a red pepper, even more interesting and exotic to them. So we can model eating new and unusual foods and in unusual ways. Kids' taste buds change over time. And so even if they tried something yesterday or 2 weeks ago or last year, encourage them to try it again. It might taste different to them, but don't force them to eat anything. And we can, again, model healthy eating and teach about nutrition, but certainly, don't shame students for what they're eating or what their comfort foods are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
And one of the things that you said was taste buds growing over time or changing over time. I've had so many students tell me 3 or 4 years ago, oh, I don't like mushrooms, or no, I don't like beans. And now they're like, can we get the roasted chickpeas back on the menu? Or I didn't know there was mushrooms in that chicken. It was really good. So it's exciting to see that, to see them, their taste buds and their desires to learn grow.
That's excellent. Thanks, Allie, for sharing that. All right, so we're nearing the end here. And this last slide is just a reminder to you that there are going to be 2 PDF documents that are going to be shared with you along with this recording of this presentation. And we encourage you to take some time and really read through those documents. One of them is specific recommendations for schools about changes that they can make, that schools can make within their own cafeterias and classrooms. The other is links to further resources if you want to do more learning on this topic. But to spend a moment around the specific recommendations for school communities, we wanted to highlight just a few that stood out to us. And in particular, Allie pulled out a few that she really wanted to highlight as things that spoke to her as changes that could be made in our district, or changes that have already been made in our district, or things that just made her think. So I'll let her talk those through.
So one of the most important, and I know this is shared by everybody, is that every student access food with no questions asked in public. If they don't have the money to pay for something, which luckily this year we don't have to worry about still. They've already eaten, but they're still hungry. We're going to deal with it. We're going to feed those kids. Every kid eats. Okay. The next one, I'm probably going to get pushback for, but this is a really big thing. This is something that, from the federal government on down, in any nutrition service will tell you, please don't have food be used as bribes or consequences. You can't say, you don't get your apple or your dessert if you don't eat this. Or, hey, good job today. Here's a Kit Kat bar. All right, don't use food as bribes. Don't use food as rewards. Don't use food as consequences. It's going to cause so much trouble with these kids and their relationship with food. All right.
And before you move on, Allie, I just want to reinforce what Allie said. And not only is it recommended at the federal level and at the state level and by the USDA and all of their practices, it's actually in the wellness policy for the WSESU district. Specifically says no consequences related to food and no rewards or reinforcements related to food. Now, I've worked in schools. I know that that this isn't always followed. And I hear Allie saying, yeah, there's going to be pushback on this, but we're pushing you to really examine this as a practice in the school district.
Yeah, we'll bring that up another time. I'm going to move on from that.
And my 14-year-old daughter would push back on me too, because she loves those ice cream parties. But anyway, moving on.
So adults on lunch duty, this is something I encourage back at Academy at all the schools that I've worked at, that if it's possible, adults should sit and eat lunch with the kids, not just stand in a corner and talk to each other while the kids are eating. It gives them more engagement with the kids. And it also shows, especially if the adults are eating the same school food, that the school food is something that's to be desired, not something that just because, oh, well, I get free lunch, I have to eat this. So that's a big one for me. Another one is the cafeteria should always be considered a place where it's just for food. There shouldn't be computers out, phones out, laptops, games, none of that. They should be sitting there eating, interacting with their other students. The adults in there should only have electronics on for, emergencies. I shouldn't see teachers sitting there playing on their phone while they're supposed to be on lunch duty. And that's, yeah, sorry, I got nothing else to say on that one.
Great. Yeah, it's a time for learning social skills and teaching social skills and modeling all that to students.
And the last one is something I'm really proud about, is encouraging culturally diverse foods in our menus. And that's something that we've taken a lot of pride with our Where in the World Are We Eating project. Plus we've done a bunch of other fun days. We'll be doing something for Cinco de Mayo. We're doing something for St. Patrick's Day. So we do add a lot of culturally diverse foods, and it's really fun watching the kids get excited to try it.
Great. Yeah, I'm just so proud of the work that Allie and her staff are doing, and the whole district is doing around Where in the World Are We Eating. With, I know the music teachers and art teachers have gotten involved, and different classrooms have done presentations and learnings, and it's just added so much to students' experience and willingness to try new foods and learn about places in the world where students in our district are actually from. It's something that I share with colleagues around the country as a real success story. So thanks, Allie. It's Allie's brainchild, and it is incredibly inspiring, not just to me, but to many, many people. And that's all we've got for you today. So thank you so much.
I always say that I love this picture.
Oh, yeah. Joelle, that comes from the presentation with Joelle. I give credit to Joelle for that picture. I don't think that she took it, but she chose it. So great. Contact me, contact Allie if you have any questions about this presentation. Keep doing the good work that you're doing. Keep just thinking deeply about, what we're teaching our students intentionally and unintentionally, and how we can all bring our best selves and support each other in bringing our best selves to our work with students in the cafeteria, in the classrooms, and in everything that we do.
And if there's anything that you think of that would make it easier for our students in coming through the cafeteria or in eating in their classrooms, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know, and we'll talk about it and see how we can make things easier for them. So thanks.
Thank you.
All right.